So, hello everyone. I see that we already have a group of participants here online. Um, it's a few more minutes before we will begin, about 8 more minutes, as this webinar was announced for 6 p.m. Central European Time. Just realized that Petr, while he is a European, wasn't aware of the 3 weeks or so where we have different time zones than usual. Well, anyway, thanks for your patience, and in a few minutes we will start.
Thank you, Christoph. It's actually, I am connected with my family and I know about it, but somehow I never connected it. That's learning.
Your family and NCD International is in the same time zone. No problem. But we can use the time by setting up your presentation, Peter.
So right. I just thought I would start with just me, and then I switch, if that's okay. Yeah. Or if you want, I am prepared. I have tested it. I'm.
Okay, so you know how to do it, yeah?
Yes, I know how to do that.
Right. Okay, so then I will be quiet and shut up myself so that we don't waste any time for those who have been more than patient already. And well, you have 5 more minutes or so, Peter, before you can start.
All right. Good to know that you will be quiet so I can start to make jokes at the cost of Germans now.
Well, I have a button here where I can kick you out of the meeting.
Okay, good. We'll start in a few minutes then.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. We are starting regular webinar organized by NCD International. This one deals with NCD Research, and it's actually dealing with the US data that we have. And we are starting exactly German time. Sorry for the inconvenience to the US coaches who were given time that we thought was correct, but due to the daylight saving time that comes in US ahead of Europe, we missed 1 hour. So here we go. My name is Petr Cincala. I am originally from the Czech Republic. For the last 5 years, I am actually doing research and teaching at Andrews University. And since 2016, I took over the responsibility of being a US partner for the Natural Church Development. But my history with NCD goes much earlier, and I wanted to tell you that when did it start? About 23 years ago, when I was actually a student at Andrews University, my mentor would teach me that research can make a big difference for God's kingdom. And that somehow stuck in my mind. I never thought, envisioned that I would be a researcher, but soon afterwards, I was passionate about research. And that led me also to NCD as a student. Later on, I was also working while in Europe as a church planter, freelancing church planter. I was also involved in research for NCD International between 2003 and 2005. And just recently, I realized when I was presenting NCD Research at a conference called the Society for Scientific Study of Religion conference, I realized that the dream I had before, and somehow I've forgotten, is actually coming back and coming true. In 2004, there was NCD Summit in South Africa, and all these partners for NCD met in South Africa. And we had different workshops, and my workshop, guess what, was about NCD research. And back then, when later on in the plenary session, someone was recapping the workshop, they made fun and sort of exaggerated my obsession with the data, that you can find and do almost anything with the NCD data when you do research. And my ego back then hurt a little bit. But then what I'm about to present and where I'm right now with the data, I can see that really the NCD data provides wealth of information beyond the assessment for local congregations. So that I just thought I would share that with you. Dreams sometimes take a long time before they get fulfilled. And on the way, I thought I forgot all about it, and now it's back. Now, the good news is that through presenting NCD research for the last 2 years, at least in my case, that God is opening new doors, and the interest in NCD is increasing among denominational researchers in particular, and also denominational administrators, because they are increasingly looking for help from researchers. That's something that wasn't that true before, but I've noticed, for example, that some denominations have hired researchers and theologians to invent a tool for assessing health of congregations, and we are starting to have conversation, and I'm seeing that they are basically discovering something that has already been discovered, and so we discuss how we can collaborate and work together. for this presentation, I just want to tell you that this study and presentation is working only with US data. I do not have permission at this point to present findings from the worldwide data, although I know NCD International is offering research studies and services for all the partners worldwide. I also want to say that this presentation is for practitioners, not for scientists. So I'm not using any figures that would be hard to understand for someone who is not really involved in scientific research. So I called it the best practices of congregations in USA. In the database from 2008, when the new survey started, till the end of 2018, I was able to analyze and work with 10,590 profiles, including the multiple profiles. And if I wanted to know how many congregations or particular gatherings, unique gathering are we talking about, I came to 8,465 of unique cases in this database, just for your information. When we look at the data, we find that the data is quite diverse. We have some denominations more involved than others. 23% are the Methodist profiles, and then followed by Lutherans, 7%, and then other mainline like Reformed or Presbyterian or United Church of Christ, UCC, or ELCA, and all those. We have all together for the mainline 40%, okay? And then we have in the second big batch, we have Baptists, Seventh-day Adventists, Nazarene, and other evangelicals. And that's about half of the data. And for the remaining, we have interdenominational, independent, and others. Among the others are also Catholic, not too many of them, and also some Orthodox, just to let you know. Looking at this whole database by the results, which this is what you as coaches are working with, we have 8% of the sample is with the result, average result below 35. And then we have 31% between 35 and 50, which 50 is the national average, as you well know. And then we have 42% above average, but below 65. And then finally, we have 20% above 65. And I also, because you know that the standard deviation is 15, so I was also looking for how many of them are above the higher standard deviation, so above 80 points and more, and you can see that it's 3%. I want to tell you that if any time during this presentation you will have some questions in general or some questions related to this presentation, please don't hesitate and let me know. And I hope I will be able to address that immediately. But I also hope that I will be able to get feedback from you for the research. So thank you for your active participation. Now, I was also looking at the distribution of particularly the healthy congregations. By healthy, I mean the congregations that the average was 65 and more. For the last 5 years, it was around over 500 congregations. And look at the map, you can see actually where they are distributed. By the way, that gives me a good opportunity to tell you that we are preparing, at least for the United States territory, NCD app, which then will have not only frequently asked questions and baby steps for those who are starting, and even for coaches who, for example, did not have experience with the electronic version of the survey and who would like to know. So we hope that the app will have all the answers and the instructions, but also we envision that we would like to have list of churches that are actually healthy and growing and are willing to share the wealth of their experience with others. So we would have a list of those churches through this NCD app available as well. So if, for example, it is in a close proximity to a congregation that would like to see how healthy church looks like, so hopefully they should be able to visit. So that's what we're working on, and we will have the NCD app available very soon. I was hoping we would have that by now, but we're still finishing some questions and answers and preparing the first version to be well done. So you can see that United States is still not covered completely, so there is still a lot of work to be done. To my knowledge, there is around 350,000 congregations across the United States. So, and we hope that in this present time, when the discussion is more and more about vitality of churches, because honestly, denominations, most of them are dealing with decline, and some churches, they have to even close. And so they are looking for what can we do to help to revitalize churches. And I think NCD can play a pretty good part and be very helpful, not just because of the research, but also because of the experience, the wealth of also the tools and the insights that we have and that we can offer. So for all of us, not just me as a partner in my office and my team, but you coaches in the United States, this is a big challenge and appeal for us to mobilize. And I'm glad that we can actually do that also through our 2-day NCD trainings that we have. And the trainings are also open as a refresher for those who are already involved with NCD for a long time and they have experiences, but still NCD has developed and is offering some more features and more insights, and we can share that together and be continually educated. Okay, the next slide here shows actually from the practical point of view, you wonder like, so what would be the minimum score and maximum score? So here you see all 8 qualities. In the United States, in the last 10 years, the lowest score for empowering leadership was -21. For gift-based ministry, -29. Passionate spirituality, -6. Effective structures, -11. Inspiring worship, -23. Holistic small groups, -15. Need-oriented evangelism, -2. And loving relationships, -24. And the maximum, on the other hand, 107 points, 115, 104, 105, 97, 101, 114, 116. So this is just for your interest. If you wanted to use it as an illustration, you can. And also this presentation will, of course, be available for all the coaches upon your request. We can send it to you, and you also have access on the coaches side at ncdchurchsurvey.org. The next slide. Recently, coaches were asking, so in the United States, what are the frequent minimum factors and what are the maximum scores, the most frequent? And I thought it's hard for us because we have this national norm and the norm is 50. But when I was looking for frequency of minimum factors in all the 8 qualities, or also the maximum scores in a given profiles, then this is the percentage I run into. So I can tell you that the most frequent minimum factor in the United States, almost every fifth profile, is holistic small groups, followed by inspiring worship and passionate spirituality. And the least occurrence of minimum factor has the need-oriented evangelism, 8.1% only. Less than 1 in 10 profiles have minimum factor need-oriented evangelism. And on the other hand, in the United States, we have almost every fifth profile has the maximum score. The highest score is gift-based ministry. And the least occurring maximum score is with effective structures, only 5.6%. Okay, so that's more for just practical side. And then let's look at healthy scores, which means the average is 65 and more. How does it play out for the 8 qualities? Again, we have the most frequent 65 plus score in gift-based ministry. 1 in 4 profiles have gift-based ministry, 65 points and more, and closely followed by loving relationships, the same, 1 in 4, and then empowering leadership, 1 in 4. And then we have need-oriented evangelism, and then it goes down to effective structures, passionate spirituality, and inspiring worship. So I hope it makes sense. What I wanted to tell you in this slide. Let's go to the next one. One aspect that we also need to look at is the difference between the minimum and maximum score. Every profile has, the sequence of the highest score and then the lowest score. And we also look at the difference because we know from the practice that if the difference is more than 25 points, even if the scores are higher or lower, it still indicates there is some kind of tension, that there is a little bit of unbalance in the church. And of course, we can't really say what, but it really is good to have a focus group with the health team or with the church and discuss with them what's happening. Why is it that there is a difference? Some qualities are higher and some are lower, and the difference is big. But overall, when we look at the difference, we have 4% of the profiles with 10 points and less, so they are pretty balanced. That doesn't mean these are with above 65. Some of them are below, but just saying that 4% of profiles have pretty good balance. 49% have the difference between maximum and minimum score 11 to 20 points, which is still good, and that makes it more than half of the profiles that we have in pretty good shape in terms of the balance between the 8 quality scores. And then we have 21 to 30 points different. It's more than 1/3 of all the profiles. And then 11% of the profiles have really unbalanced scores. And regardless of what is the score, how high or low it is, it simply says that it's not healthy. Something is not working well in that particular church. Of course, some of you, and I've recently had also email coming from a psychologist from a university, and I know researchers are asking, so is the 65 hypothesis that was originally proclaimed in the initial NCD book, is it still working? Is it confirmed? So I looked at the US sample again, and I have arranged the profiles just a little bit differently. And here you see the pie. The pie is saying that over half of the profiles, 57%, have all the 8 qualities below 65. And then 24% of the profiles have some of the qualities above 65, but not all of them, and the average score is below 65. But then you have 13% of profiles that have some scores above 65, and also the average, the overall average is above 65. And then finally, you have 6% of the profiles in the United States in the last 10 years that have all 8 qualities above 65. So they are the healthy ones. And of course, we would like to see if they are growing or not. And that's what the next slide shows. I'm using the same 4 categories that I have just described in the pie, and I have measured the most stable church growth rate, and that is the average annual growth rate for the 5 years. You can recall that in the pastor's survey, there is a question about attendance for the last 5 years, and we take the overall attendance in the last 5 years, and we create an average annual growth rate. And here we are comparing the annual growth rate, the average annual growth rate for the last 5 years between the 4 qualities, and you can see that with all 8 qualities below 65, the average growth rate is negative, so the churches are declining. And then you have some churches with 65 scores, but the average is below. There is a little growth, average growth 1.8%. And then those who have average score above 65, and some of the qualities are higher, of course, then the growth rate is 7.9%. And those churches that have all 8 qualities above 65, they have the average annual growth rate over 13%. So is that good news? I hope so. Of course, not all single churches that have 85 score for in each quality have the growth rate this high. Some may be even declining, and when I was looking at it, I can see that there are some reasons why church would have the score 65 with all 8 qualities and still have not really positive growth rate. There are definitely, in some cases, external factors, and we know that some churches are declining, and it is a general phenomenon in the United States, and it might be due to the location. You know, there are secular areas where the typical church may not have attendance increased even if they are healthy, And so there has to be some more research done on how to actually organize church in such a way to respond to the needs of people and so forth. Then in some cases, I also saw, in a very rare, but in some cases, that there are inaccurate records of church attendance. There might be even a mistake. And we try to clean when there is obviously mistake with one digit added, or something like that. And then another reason, the minimum and maximum difference may be too big. And then also in the United States, and that's very interesting, and we will come to that later, it is size of the church. Although in the original research, the claim was that small churches are healthier than large churches. I have been researching this issue within the US using the NCD data, and actually that is not the case for United States, and we will get back to it in a little bit. Overall, I want to tell you that in the last 5 years, we've had 193 unique churches with profile that is healthy. That means that all 8 qualities are above 65. And I hope that we can connect with these churches soon and have their permission to have them listed in the list of accessible through the NCD app, and we can actually connect them with those who are interested in Healthy Church and would like to visit Healthy Church and see how it works with them. Also, an encouraging statistics for coaches. When you look at those churches that have done profiles in this database in the last 10 years more than once, the tendency is those who have done more than once, that they are growing health. So it is very important for the churches, and sadly 80% of the profiles we have in our database in the last 10 years were done only one time. The church would not come back again. And I hope that we can do whatever we can, either through articles and presentations and working with people, and encourage churches to actually not just go through the motion of having the assessment, but actually get involved in implementing the NCD cycle. Because here you can see that those who came back and did NCD again, NCD assessment, which means that they were actively involved in improving the health, that it actually works. Because in the first cycle, over the half of churches would not have any of the 8 qualities more than 65. And by the time those churches who had 4 cycles done, it would decrease into half of what it was in the first cycle. So there is a chance that those who will go back and do the cycle again, that they will have results of having the qualities over 65. That's the message. All right, I mentioned that the interesting thing in the United States is when you look at the NCD results and growth by the size of church. And so I have divided the whole data into small congregations based on literature and based on the database that we have Small congregations means attendance of 100 people and less. Mid-sized congregation is actually, it's supposed to be 101 to 250. Sorry about that. And large congregations are 251 and more. So half of the churches that we have in our NCD database are small congregations, and then we have 32%, 1/3 is actually mid-sized congregations, and then 18% are large congregations of any size. Some of them have over 1,000 people attending, but in general, it's larger than 250 of attendance. Looking at the annual growth rate, small churches are declining, mid-sized churches plateauing, and large churches growing. I see I have some questions here. Someone is asking if we have transfer growth and baptism growth, etc. Well, sorry to say, but the facilitators form that is filled out by the pastor does not have this kind of information. It has only attendance of adults, current attendance, then attendance of children, and then attendance 1 year ago, attendance of 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and 5 years ago. And that's what we can work with. So I don't have any figures on transfer or baptismal growth. But step by step, I would like to analyze all the information that are available in the facilitators form. So we will hear more even about the presence of children and how does it correlate with the vitality of church and so forth. Now, another question. I am more interested in what are the reasons where churches are declining in scores. That is a good question for me. And I haven't done this research to see if from the data there are any predictors or any available information that we can have for indicating some of the correlations that go with churches that are declining in scores. However, there is actually one strong element, and that is leadership style, and I will get to that in a little bit. Okay. Okay. Again, congregational health by size. These are only the 4 categories that we worked with. The churches with all 8 qualities below 65, some above 65, some above, and the average above 65, and then finally all. And so you can see that it even shows here that small churches, there is a less probability that they will have, slightly less probability they will have all 8 qualities above 65. This is hard. The longer I'm back in US, I see that this goes and it relates to US mentality and worldview. It's hard for someone from Europe to understand what exactly it is. Maybe in some other parts of the world, this would not be the case. But the everyday life and the culture in US somehow is that bigger things are attractive. So that may also be reason, and there may be other reasons that I cannot really say. It would be only anecdotal because I have not done research on that topic. I'm just saying that through and through the research from different angles, I was looking if there is any leeway how to show that small churches are actually doing better. I have to admit that I did not find, except of 3 questions actually, that are in the NCD survey that show better than with large churches. listen to the three questions. Question: when new people come to church events, we approach them openly and lovingly. That question scored better for small churches. And then another one: new Christians find friends in our church quickly. That was better with small churches. And then the last one: I know that other church members pray for me regularly. That was also more positive scored with small churches. Okay, that's for the congregations by size. Then another very interesting thing, related in some ways to the size, is the presence of age groups. You know that in the pastor survey, there is one question asking to click what of the 6 age groups are present and dominant in the church. And this slide actually shows the percentage of presence of the age categories in all the profiles, all the unique profiles. I'm not counting the multiple profiles in this percentage, okay? So when you look at it, the most frequent age group is middle-aged, followed by seniors, and then children, young families, youth, and young adults. Young adults, only 17% of young adults, of congregations have the presence of young adults. Let's look at this picture once again, and I divided it into the large, mid-size, and small churches, so you can see how it is divided. So it's the same percentage that we showed in the previous slide, but now you can see the total scores of the presence of the age group in small congregations, mid-size, and large congregations. Young adults, of course, it's a big issue in the United States, how to retain them and how to bring them back. What I have noticed in our research, that young adults, although in this slides we see that they are actually present even in smaller churches and mid-sized churches, but in large churches, overall, young adults have the tendency to attend churches with higher attendance, and also with higher scores, as we can see in the next slide. Anyway, the first slide is showing us the annual average growth rate if we divide the whole data set into the 6 categories and then round the average annual growth rate. You can see that the churches where young adults are present have the highest annual growth rate, 4.3%, the average annual growth rate. Whereas with the presence of seniors, the average growth rate is negative, and middle age is pretty much plateaued. Here we show the same categories, but we're looking at the average score of the 8 qualities. And you can see that the congregations with the young adults present as a dominant group, they tend to have higher scores, just slightly, but still higher scores than other congregations where the dominant groups are other than young adults. Here I'm showing, I put together all the congregations that claim they have the presence of young adults and the average score on all 8 qualities. Look at that. It's a challenge for us in the United States to really increase our health, because from this slide you see that young adults are receptive to healthier churches. And in this slide, we have the average adult attendance in the congregations that have all the congregations put together. You can imagine that the congregations are overlapping because this was a question where the pastor could mark more age groups. But when we divided the sample into these 6 categories and measured the average adult attendance, it is 204 for children present actually. 230 is the average adult attendance for churches with the presence of youth. 249 adults attending in churches where young adults are present, and then 226 adult attendance for churches with the presence and dominant presence of young families, and then 175 with middle-aged, and 151 adult attendance for seniors. Senior age group presence. All right. Pastor's age. I have to tell you, this actually was a topic that I presented last fall at the Society for Scientific Study of Religion and also Religious Research Association. And I actually happened to compare NCD database and also another database that is called the Cooperative Congregational Research Project. And it's also called Faith Communities Today. It's a research group that has been doing research for the last over 20 years, funded by Lilly Foundation. And I'm part of that group, and it's a group of all denominations that were interested to join, and also even other faiths like Baha'i or Muslims or Hebrews. And I compared the randomly selected sample research findings from 2015 from that research with NCD research, which is not randomly sample, it's not random sample, it is a data collected over 10 years though, and it's pretty big data. And interestingly enough, the findings was very similar. And that was actually the point when I saw how the researchers were thinking, oh, the NCD data is credible. I'm more interested in NCD. Tell me more. So that was a good moment, and I hope we can still build this credibility of NCD data and also NCD implementation and NCD tools with the researchers and also with other administrators and denominations, and local churches as well through this results. So I divided pastors into 4 categories. Almost every 5th pastor is 40 years and less. And then we have about 1 in 4 is 41 to 50 years of age. And then over 1/3 are pastors between 51 and 60 years of age. And then 1 in 5 is 60 years of age and older. And I took the congregations of these pastors and I measured the congregational growth. And this is what I found out. Congregations whose leading pastor is 40 years and less are growing. And we're talking about not just the last year, but 5 years, reported growth 4%. Congregations with the leading pastor 41 to 50, 2.3 growth rate. And the rest was negative growth rate. Okay, so I then was also looking at the average health score of all the 8 qualities and found that the difference is not really that big, but there is still a difference. Let's say pastors who are 50 years old and younger have churches with higher average score than pastors who are 51 to 60 and then over 60. That's an interesting finding. Maybe that it somehow does make sense because with the increasing age, we are learning from the mistakes. We have more wisdoms, we have more insights. And still, I think the conclusion from this and the application definitely should not be, well, if I'm 50 and older, that I should stop being a pastor. But it's actually a great input to discuss what should be the role of a pastor. Okay. Yes, I'm hearing you, Nelson. It is very interesting. And I am actually exploring this finding more in depth to see what actually makes the difference. And I have a few more slides that I will present, which will show us some indication. But let's see what else do we have right now. Okay. Again, I was looking at the average adult attendance compared by these 4 categories of pastors' age. So here we see that actually the younger pastors, they have growing churches, but the average attendance is lower than for the pastors who lead congregations, for the pastors in age categories of 41 to 50 and 51 to 60. You can see that. Maybe they're still learning, but there is still, but you saw the health scores about the same, like with the next category of 41 to 50, but the percentage of growth was quite higher. So pastors that are 60 years and older, if you are coaching a congregations where pastors are older than 60 years, you might look at this finding. That doesn't necessarily mean that every pastor is like that. I recently have been training, and there was one pastor who was interested to become a coach, and he was 65 years, and he was so full of energy planting a church. And I was thinking, like, boy, that pastor does not definitely match our findings. So we should not really generalize it for everyone, but the overall trend is here showing us certain trends, and we probably should keep that in mind when we work with churches. Okay, and here is probably the last category I have for our webinar today, and that is leadership style. You know that the pastoral survey has even some other interesting questions, but this is where I got, because I received the data early this year and I spent a lot of time formatting and to be able to present you what I have. But I have done research on this topic with the previous data where the last 3 years were not included. And so I knew this is going to be interesting. And so I have run the test for measuring actually the presence of leadership style. There is this question that has 9 different styles. I don't think it was based on some kind of research. The styles were simply listed based on experience and based on the knowledge that Christian and his team had when they were revising the survey and then pastoral survey, and so they simply left this question there, but I think it's very important. So we have 9 styles: team-oriented, relational, partnership, people-oriented, serving, goal-oriented, task-oriented, democratic, and also authoritarian. Again, pastors can check more boxes, so there is an overlap of different styles. But I was wondering, okay, when we run the analysis and want to see the growth rate for congregations where the pastors self-report these styles they have, what would be the results? And this is actually, before we get to that, there is another one. How does these leadership styles occur in congregations by size? So before you see the same slide, only it is divided into each leadership style presence is divided into 3 categories: in small congregation, mid-sized congregation, and large congregation. This slide will be will be available for you. You can look at that. We have the largest, the team-oriented is the most basic. It basically almost every 4 pastors in 5 claim to be team-oriented, and then also in large churches as well, that this percentage is the highest, and you can see that it's sort of proportionate size. Even if we divide it into the size of congregations, would be the percentage of the presence of these leadership styles. And now is what I wanted to show you is the growth rate of the congregations whose pastors report the following leadership styles. So the highest growth rate is reported by authoritarian. I have to laugh here because you would think like, okay, here's style that we should recommend to pastors so that they have growing congregations, but that's not exactly the case. Actually, the authoritarian style is present in just so few congregations that it's actually not statistically significant when we do any comparisons, I have to tell you. So I should put it in brackets here. It's not statistically significant, and also many of the authoritarian pastors are also people-oriented or team-oriented, or they have simply other leadership styles. There is a question if the pastors are stating their leadership preferences or their perceived leadership style, are definitions listed? No, that's the case that they always see these 9 different categories and there are no definitions listed. And that actually was interesting to me when I realized that actually serving leadership style does not show quite a growth. Actually, what I realized that pastors who claim they are serving leaders, that they actually have less growing churches, their churches are smaller size, and they have less healthy churches. And so, and then the churches are smaller actually. And so when you look at the big theory of Greenlaft and his servant leadership, it's well discussed. I actually wrote recently an article with one of my doctoral students, and the article deals exactly with the issue of servant leadership in the light of the NCD database. It doesn't really show us a big leadership style that has all what we want for the health of congregations and for the growth and well-being of congregations. It actually plays a little bit against it. And so what does it actually mean? That is described in the article, and it's probably beyond the discussion right now here to go in detail about why is it that the serving is not doing so well. I think that's precisely because Greenleaf's definition, in the beginning there was no definition, it was pretty vague, and right now he may have it well defined, but still the folk perception of what is it serving leadership is probably a little bit different. Well, the question here is, so how valid is this information? It seems to measure perceptions, not the actual style. Well, the actual style then we can see through the empowering leadership scores and the questions that are in the empowering leadership quality, because that is valid. However, this slide shows the self-perceived leadership styles. But in any way, what I find pretty much resonating with the reality is that the best match for growing and healthier congregations is the match of these 4 leadership styles put together: goal-oriented, relational, people-oriented, and team-oriented. I tried all different matches, and then I measured the growth rate and the health and all that. And really, the best doing congregations in terms of growth rate and health are congregations whose pastor claims to be goal-oriented, relational, people-oriented, and team-oriented. And I think that is an insight that may be very valuable for coaches. And we can look at the health right now, the same categories by health scores, average score of all 8 qualities. Again, we have authoritarian, but I've already told you why I don't take it seriously. But then we have goal-oriented, team-oriented, relational, people-oriented, and only then we have task-oriented, partnership, serving, and democratic. You may also be interested in finding that I'm not showing here, but recently I was looking at this from the perspective of age group of pastors, right? This is the previous category that I showed. And some of the comparisons were not significant, but what was significant was that actually goal orientation is decreasing with age of a pastor, okay? Younger pastors are the ones who, more than the older ones, claim that they are goal-oriented. And so you can suddenly see that there is actually a story behind it. Why is it that pastors with increasing age that do not have so much growing churches and the health is lower than the ones who are younger? Interestingly enough, while pastors with age are less goal-oriented, they are more people-oriented, but they are also more serving. That's what the data is showing. And so that helped me just a little bit to understand why is it that with the increasing age of a pastor, there is a tendency of the figures to break and go the opposite direction. I'm hoping to also write an article about this issue in view of what John Maxwell wrote about the different levels of leadership development, because this finding actually is favorable to what he has stated, where he says that if the leader is developing, at some point will step away from the executive role and will become more a consultant, more the one who is helping, mentoring, sharing the insights, the experiences he has, and will no longer be in the executive role. So that would be, at this point, just my educated guess, so to speak, what this, how this may be well explained. And then we have the last slide, I believe, showing congregations, again with pastors, with the 9 leadership styles by average adult attendance. And here you see even the authoritarian is actually lower, but we don't really want to take it seriously. But again, the goal-oriented pastors, at least how they self-perceived, have churches with higher attendance, a little bit higher attendance than those who team-oriented or those with partnership, people-oriented, relational, and the task-oriented serving. You can see the jump, it goes down, and then democratic. So the lesson for me is that, or when I talk to the denominational leaders who would like to recruit pastors or do some research, I'm telling them that maybe the leadership styles that have emerged from this study, the team-oriented, goal-oriented, people-oriented, and relational, that they might be the ones that actually help the churches to also be increasing and vital again. I'm also mindful of the fact that holistic small groups are the lowest, category in the United States, and it may also be connected to the culture, because this is a very individualistic culture. It's not really communal culture like you have cultures in Africa or somewhere else. And so for a biblically based community church that is growing and healthy, the community level, we probably need to get out of our comfort zones, cultural comfort zones, and be more community oriented. And I see in those 4 leadership styles, actually, the one is with the vision oriented, okay? And we know the verse in the Bible, without vision, people perish. So that's one thing. But then the team-oriented, people-oriented, and relational, it goes with holistic small groups and loving relationships and many congregations. And I'm part of denomination whose the lowest scores in average are exactly holistic small groups and loving relationships. So I'm seeing that having pastors who are more team-oriented, people-oriented, and relational, and they have vision, that is actually an answer for a number of churches who still show some signs of life, so that they can actually grow and improve their health. And so we're at the end of this presentation. I have a number of other topics that I would like to explore as the time will allow me. And maybe in a year or 2 years or whenever the NCD International will give me another chance to present, I will present some other topics. But for now, I'm turning to you for feedback, for additional questions, comments, and maybe even some insights that you have gained throughout this presentation. you can either turn on your microphone or you can type it if you want. There is a question if the findings are consistent with the US African American churches. For us, unfortunately, in this data set, we don't have ethnic groups in the pastors survey. And I know for United States, it is quite relevant and important, but you have to also remember that this survey is designed for worldwide use, and so we don't have that. But as I see that this data is quite consistent with the other data set I have described, and I will have even more data sets, so I would like to compare, do more comparisons between the different data sets that I have, and maybe that may give me more answer for this question, but I cannot really get more answer on ethnicity from NCD dataset. Someone is asking about serving style and if I can provide the article that I wrote and Maxwell's article. Once I have both articles, I will provide them. After today's presentation, I will provide the one actually that we have just finished is about to be published. So if you give us a few weeks, we will give you the published version. I hate to send it out before it is published, okay? So, but I know that all coaches who participated in the webinar will receive this as soon as we have it. Thank you. Question, would you suggest that planting new small churches is a better means to church growth than attracting more and more people to mega churches? And see, this is an issue that probably will be looking differently in different contexts and different continents. In US, for whatever reason, the larger churches attract more people at this point, and larger churches tend to be also healthier, and they, for whatever reason, although it is more numbers joining, percentage-wise, it's much more difficult to have church growing in percents when you have large churches, but still the data that we have are showing that large churches are doing better overall. However, I would still like to zoom on churches by age, younger churches younger than 5 years. If the time they took the profile, they were founded 5 years and less. I would like to look at that and see if we can dig and get some insights from the analysis. I also would like to see if churches who are planting other churches are actually showing some more signs of health, and if, despite of the loss that they have by releasing some people for church plants, they are still doing well, even in terms of numbers and growth rate. But that's something I am yet to do. I don't have it right now. Okay, thank you very much for your participation, and again, apology for the inconvenience of starting 1 hour later in US time. This will be recorded and available. The recording will be available, and I hope it will be useful for even those that did not participate in this webinar but have access to that. Thank you, Christoph, and I am giving you the right to conclude this webinar.
Hey, thank you, Peter, for all your preparations and research to be able to do this presentation, this webinar. Yeah, and thanks for all the conclusions and interesting results that you showed to us. There are some points in that we really have to discuss more in details. Well, and I wish you all the best. It sounds like you have a little bit of cold in your voice. Is that right? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, just a little bit.
So, well, that costs you some extra energy. Thanks for having that for us. Yeah, we did record the webinar, and it will be available probably next week or so on the NCD coaches, on the coach community website. And I also would like to invite you to our next coach community webinar, which will be, let me check, on June 5th. And our presenter will be Adam Johnson from Australia. He will still define the topics. I'm not sure what the topic will be, but we will send you an email on time. And I hope that in June we won't have any time zone challenges.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for being with us, and have a nice day.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.